You probably grew up hearing things like, "Back in my day, we didn't complain. We just did what had to be done. No one helped us, we figured it out." And maybe you've wondered why your grandparents, or even your parents, seem emotionally distant, overly strict, or strangely uncomfortable talking about feelings. Why they value work so much, why they equate rest with laziness, why they sometimes struggle to understand your stress, anxiety, or burnout. This isn't because they don't care. It's because their psychology was forged in a completely different world. If you want to understand baby boomers, you have to understand the environment their nervous systems adapted to. They were born between 1946 and 1964, right after World War II. That detail alone changes everything. Most of their parents were war survivors, people who lived through hunger, loss, displacement, and fear. And when trauma isn't processed, it doesn't disappear, it becomes culture. So you didn't grow up with emotionally expressive caregivers, you grew up with survivors.
Please like and subscribe to help my channel grow.
In many baby boomer households, love wasn't verbal, it was practical. Food on the table, a roof overhead, clean clothes. Emotional sensitivity wasn't a priority because survival had been the priority for too long. When your parents had learned that feelings don't stop bombs or pay bills, they taught you, often unintentionally, to suppress yours. That's why baby boomers often learned very early that emotions should be controlled, postponed, or kept private. Crying didn't solve problems. Talking about fear didn't make it go away. Doing your duty did. Psychologically, this created a generation with high emotional restraint and strong self-discipline. You learned to tolerate discomfort without questioning it, and over time, that tolerance became identity. You weren't asked how you felt, you were asked if you did what was expected. This is why baby boomers often equate responsibility with worth. Being useful meant being valuable. Being productive meant being safe. Idleness wasn't neutral, it was dangerous. If you weren't contributing, you were failing. That belief didn't come from nowhere. Baby boomers grew up during a time when social structures were rigid but clear. There were rules, hierarchies, defined roles, and within those systems, you knew where you stood. Psychologically, that created a sense of order and predictability, something deeply comforting after generational chaos. Authority wasn't questioned because authority was seen as stabilizing. Teachers, employers, institutions, even if they were flawed, represented structure, and structure meant survival. That's why many baby boomers struggle with today's skepticism toward authority. To them, questioning everything doesn't look like freedom, it looks like instability. And then there's work. For baby boomers, work was not about passion or self-actualization, it was about duty. You worked not because you loved it, but because people depended on you. Loyalty to a company wasn't naive, it was logical. Stability came from consistency, not experimentation. So, when you hear a boomer say, "I worked 40 years without complaining," what they're really saying is, "I survived by enduring," and endurance shaped their psychology deeply. But here's where it gets more complicated. Baby boomers were also raised during massive cultural shifts, civil rights movements, Cold War anxiety, the constant background threat of nuclear war. Even when things looked stable on the surface, uncertainty lived underneath it all. So while they appear confident and grounded, many baby boomers developed a deep internal anxiety about losing what they had built. When you've worked your whole life to secure stability, the idea of losing it becomes terrifying. This is why control is such a big theme in boomer psychology. Control over finances, control over routines, control over family dynamics. Not because they want power, but because unpredictability once meant danger. Emotionally, this generation often struggles with vulnerability, not because they lack emotions, but because expressing them was never modeled as safe. Many learned that showing weakness invited consequences, not comfort. So instead of saying, "I'm scared," they say, "Be careful." Instead of, I'm lonely, they say, you should visit more. Instead of, I don't understand this new world, they say, things were better before. Underneath the rigidity, there is often unprocessed grief. Grief for youth, grief for lost simplicity, grief for bodies that no longer cooperate, grief for a world that no longer reflects their values. But this grief is rarely named. It's carried silently. And yet, baby boomers are not emotionally cold. They are emotionally contained. They show love through sacrifice, through consistency, through being there when it matters, even if they don't say the words you wish they would. Many would rather fix something for you than talk about it. And here's something important we don't say often enough. Baby boomers raised us with the tools they had, not the ones they needed. They passed down resilience, discipline, and endurance because those qualities saved them. They didn't teach emotional literacy because no one taught them. They didn't normalize rest because rest once meant vulnerability. Understanding this doesn't mean excusing harm, but it does mean replacing judgment with context. Your grandparents aren't emotionally distant because they don't love deeply. They're distant because love once had to be quiet to survive. And maybe the real psychological bridge between generations isn't about who's right or wrong, but about recognizing that every generation adapts to the world it's given. Baby boomers adapted to a world that demanded strength. You're adapting to a world that demands awareness. Neither is easy. Both leave scars. And when you see your grandparents through that lens, not as outdated or rigid, but as shaped by survival, something softens. Because beneath the discipline, the rules, and the silence, there is a generation that endured so the next ones could feel. And that, too, is psychology.